Hi, I'm Billy. And welcome to Jack of Trades. In this video, we will make a simple data table implementation using Livewire. This data table will have a standard functionality like search, sorting, and pagination, like most data table components found in any web application. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. If you're still new here, watch the previous video. The link is in the description below. So, the first thing that we need to do is add another invocable controller called postList. In case you didn't know, invocable controllers in Laravel are just controllers that you need not specify the function to be called when you add it into your routes. So let's open the routes, web.php, and add the postList controller. Let's also add another route for the post page as well. Now, let's open Resources, Views, Layouts, app.blade.php and add the links in the navigation menu in our user interface. Now that we added them, let's also add the post list view as the main view container for our Livewire component. Because this is just basically the same as home.blade.php, let's copy the contents of the home.blade.php to call our post data table in this view later. Let's then create a Livewire component like so and add it in our post list blade.php. Now that everything is set up, let's now add the logic of our data table. Let's close these guys up. And then, open up post-datatable.blade.php, the Livewire class for our data table. In this class file, we are going to use Livewire pagination and the post model. So if you have been following along in this Livewire tutorial series, I can safely assume that you already know how to use the pagination class in Livewire. But to recap the topic of pagination, you just need to import the with pagination class from Livewire and use it inside your class like so. Please note that we're going to set the header columns in our data table like a configuration. That is why we are creating the headers variable to store the structure there. So the idea is this. We will create a function called headerConfig and map the columns that match our database table in a key value pair like so. So the key would represent the name of the columns from the database. And the value of the array will serve as the label of the header that will appear in the view that we will create later. For this to work, we will set the value of the table headers inside the mount function. In case you forgot, the mount function runs only once when the Livewire component loads. And then, let's create a function to show the list of the post. For a start, let's just copy what we did earlier in this tutorial. We will modify this function later. Let's also return the list of the post in the render function like so. And now, let's begin to create the view for our data table. Remember that the table headers are set like a configuration in our backend. So, we will set it for each statement to display those fields for us to do this. As you can see, we can dynamically add and remove columns because of this design. We will also add this concept to the data list later. Listen carefully because this is an essential concept to grasp. When we try to for each the data variable, instead of statically writing the exact name of the database column, we just appended the key variable as the name's replacement. The same key variable that we just set in the backend of our headers configuration. That is why we added the header configs earlier so that we can easily manipulate what column data appears in our view by just changing the header config in our backend. In this way, we can easily change what data we want to appear in our data table to our heart's content. Before we continue, let's add in the pagination links like so. Now let's begin adding the sort column functionality. The idea is, we will create a single function to call every time we click any of the table headers. The only difference is that every time we click, we will pass the name of the database column to the function as a parameter. We already know that the key variable is the name of the database column that we mapped in our header configuration. So we will pass it in the function. And as expected, we will create the sort function to handle the sorting logic. The sort direction variable will handle the order of the record. If the current column order is ascending, we will set it to descending, and vice versa. To see what's really going on, let's display the data of the sort column and sort direction in the view and test it. Now that the sorting is working, let's add in a bit of aesthetic to our sort column. I'm just going to add an HTML arrow that checks the sort direction. If you wonder what the double exclamation means in Blade, you are telling the Blade template to display your data in a raw HTML. Blade parses variables inside the double curly brackets as strings by default, so you have to do this when you want to display a raw HTML. This time, let us try to enhance the view of our data table. As you can see, there is a bit of limitation when we dynamically loop the data in a for each statement in our view file. As a result, we are only able to see the list of our post as is. Sometimes, when you want to display data in the data tables, you need to parse some records for the sake of easy viewing. So to further emphasize our goal, let's add in a bit of enhancement to our configuration. Let's change the value of this configuration into an array and 2 more key value pairs inside it. We will manipulate this data in the front end. This time around, we will change the logic of our header like so. In this case, we need to check if the value is an array to access the label key inside it. And just display the value variable if it's not an array. And now, we will also change the logic on how we display the data. This time, we will check if the value is an array. Remember that we added a func key to store an anonymous function. We can actually pass a function or a method as a variable and dynamically run it. In our function, we expect a value variable as a parameter to pass the item key like so. Expect an error after this, because we also need to reinitialize our header config variable inside the hydrate function to ensure that function that we added inside our header config is still intact. Let's make another test. As you can see, we can parse the data of the created column by applying this approach. Even if you don't use Laravel or Livewire, this technique is always applicable in PHP 7 and below since PHP is not a statically typed language in these PHP versions. And now, let's try to add our featured image like so. And lastly, let's add a search input just above our table. We will use this to search a specific word that matches the title or the content in our post database table. We will modify the where clause inside our result data function like so. As you can see, we are using the like to search for similar words that match the one we typed in the search form. Let's make another test. It's incredible how easily we can implement dynamic data tables with Laravel Livewire. So I hope you've learned something valuable today. Please keep on requesting used cases that are commonly applied in the real-world scenario. We will try to respond to every request. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Write down your comments below and hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. Be sure to click that notification bell to get notified whenever a new video is up. Stay tuned, and see you in the next video.